Good morning, class. So, today I will deal with another new topic, that is hydrocephalus. So, everyone knew something about hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus is derived from Greek word hydro, meaning water, and cephalus, which means head. So, mainly hydrocephalus is an excessive accumulation of cerebrospinal fluid, that is CSF, resulting in abnormal widening of the spaces in the brain. So it is a condition resulting from imbalance in the cerebrospinal fluid production and absorption. Some of the disease or anatomical defect causes an increase in the amount of cerebrospinal fluid present in the cranium, which results in increased pressure against the brain tissue, that is known as hydrocephalus. Here you can see the picture. Healthy ventricles, you can see in healthy ventricles, fluid filled ventricles, there are fluid filled ventricles in the veins, they are healthy, they are the healthy ventricles. And on the opposite side you can see that there are enlarged ventricles, that is known as hydrocephalus. The pressure is increasing in the brain, widening spaces are there in the brain, enlarged ventricles are there, so that is known as hydrocephalus. Then definition: hydrocephalus is the abnormal accumulation of cerebrospinal fluid in the intracranial spaces. So here hydrocephalus is an abnormal accumulation of CSF in the intracranial spaces, or you can also say that hydrocephalus is an abnormal accumulation of CSF or cerebrospinal fluid in the ventricles and cavities of the brain. This causes increased intracranial pressure inside the skull and may cause progressive enlargement of the head. So here in the picture you can see that there is an abnormal enlargement in the intracranial spaces or in the ventricles, which results in hydrocephalus. Then before moving on further, firstly we have to, it's very important to know about the origin of the cerebrospinal fluid and the flow of the CSF fluid. So its origin, if we will see that CSF is an ultrafiltrate of plasma that enters the basal side of the choroid epithelium, and by active metabolism it is transformed into CSF and secreted at the apical or ventricular side of the epithelium. So here if we will see the origin of the cerebrospinal fluid, so it is a ultrafiltrate of plasma. CSF is an ultrafiltrate of plasma that enters the basal side of the choroid epithelium, and by active metabolism it is transformed into cerebrospinal fluid and secreted. Where it is secreted at the apical or ventricular side of the epithelium. And most of the cerebrospinal fluid is formed in the ventricular system. That's why there was enlargement in ventricular system. So most of the CSF is formed in the ventricular system, and possible sites of origin include the choroid plexus, means the CSF is originated from choroid plexus, mostly, that is 80%, and parenchyma in parenchyma 20%, and ependyma it is negligible. So most of the CSF is originated from the choroid plexus, that is 80%, and few of them originate from parenchyma, it is 20%, and in ependyma it is negligible. And do you know what is the function of cerebrospinal fluid? Cerebrospinal fluid is a clear colorless fluid which protects the brain and spinal cord from physical and chemical injuries. So CSF fluid is very important as it protects the brain and spinal cord from physical and chemical injuries. It carries oxygen and glucose from blood to the neuron. So this is the function of cerebrospinal fluid. Then if we'll see the formation rate of cerebrospinal fluid, so the formation rate of cerebrospinal fluid is to be about 20 ml per hour or 500 ml per day in adults as well as in children. and a total cerebrospinal volume in the ventricles and subocciput space is age dependent but reaches the adult volume of 150 ml by age of 5 years. So the cerebrospinal fluid volume in the ventricles and in the subocciput space is age dependent, and it reaches into the adult volume of 150 ml by only at the age of 5 years. And if you will see the intracranial pressure, so the intracranial pressure in infant is 5 to 10 mm of Hg, and in children it is 15 mm of Hg. So this is overall the total origin of the cerebrospinal fluid. Now next we will deal with the flow of cerebrospinal fluid. So this flow of cerebrospinal fluid is very important. If you understand this flow of CSF, then you will be easily able to understand about the hydrocephalus. So you can see the picture of a brain and a diagram of a brain, and you can see the numbering from 1 to 8 there along with the arrow. So here first point here itself, it says that cerebrospinal fluid or CSF is secreted by choroid plexus in each lateral ventricles. So here you can see in the first picture where it is written 1, you can see in the brain where it is written 1. So that is the place where cerebrospinal fluid is secreted, and that place is known as choroid plexus. Choroid plexus is the place where CSF is secreted. Then second, now first is that CSF is secreted in choroid plexus. Here you can see in the brain the number 1 point is there, that is known as choroid plexus, and here CSF is secreted. Then second, here we will see CSF flows through interventricular foramen into the third ventricle. So here second, in the brain, in the picture of brain, you can see the second point here, you can see. So that second point here, what it is written, CSF flows. Now CSF will flow from choroid plexus through intraventricular foramina into the third ventricle. Now where CSF is now in the third ventricle, you can see the second point, that is the third ventricle. So CSF from choroid plexus, CSF is originated. Now the CSF from choroid plexus is going to the third ventricle. Then third point here we will see that choroid plexus in third ventricle adds more of this CSF. Now here what happened, CSF CSF is in the third ventricle, and in third ventricle what happened, the choroid plexus will add more of the cerebrospinal fluid in the third ventricle. Okay. Then in fourth point we will see that CSF flows down cerebral aqueduct to the fourth ventricle. Now CSF where it will flow from third ventricle, now CSF will flow from third ventricle to the fourth ventricle through the cerebral aqueduct. Now here you can see the picture of the brain where it is written fourth. So that is fourth ventricle where CSF will flow from third ventricle to the fourth ventricle through cerebral aqueduct. Then fifth point we will see that choroid plexus in fourth ventricle adds more of the CSF. Now in fourth ventricle what happened, choroid plexus will add more cerebrospinal fluid in fourth ventricle. Okay. Then sixth point, here you can see in the fifth, in the brain, here you can see in the fifth point that choroid plexus is, will add choroid plexus in fourth ventricle will add more of the cerebrospinal fluid. Then in sixth point here we will see that CSF or cerebrospinal fluid flows out 2 lateral apertures and 1 median apertures. So here in sixth point we will see, here you can see in the picture 6 point, in the brain you can see that in 6 point what it is written, there is lateral aperture and median aperture. So you can see the point in 6, there is there are CSF flows out 2 lateral apertures and 1 medial aperture. So here the CSF will flow out from two lateral apertures and 1 median aperture. So you can see in the brain where it is located, lateral aperture and median apertures. Then you can see here lateral aperture and median aperture is there. Then in seventh point here you can see CSF fills subaquinate space and bathes external surface of the brain and spinal cord. So from the sixth point, the CSF will now fills the subaquinate spaces. Subaquinate spaces, you can see where it is 7th point. So now CSF what will do, it will fill the subaquinate spaces and bathes the external surface of the brain. External surface you can see, externally जो surface है brain का, there the CSF will fill the subaquinate space. And then at the last is at aconite villi, CSF is reabsorbed into the venous blood of dural venous sinuses. So here at the last point you can see at the upper, that is the upper in brain you can see 8th point, that in 8th point what it is written, at aconite villi CSF is reabsorbed. Now this what CSF will do, CSF will be reabsorbed where, at aconite villi. You can see here the picture in the brain, 8th point it is written, there it is aconite villi. So at that area CSF will be reabsorbed into the venous blood of dural venous sinuses, where it is reabsorbed into the venous blood of dural venous sinuses. So here it is the flow of cerebrospinal fluid. At the first CSF is secreted by choroid plexus, that was the first one. Then in second we have seen that CSF will flow from choroid plexus to the third ventricle. Then in third point, choroid plexus will add more cerebrospinal fluid or more CF in the third ventricles. And in fourth point we will see that CSF will flow from third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. And in fifth point what happened, choroid plex will add more of the CSF in fourth ventricle. Then in sixth point, CSF will flow out from 2 lateral apertures and 1 median apertures. Now CSF will change the direction, it will flow out from 2 lateral apertures and 1 median apertures. Then in 7 point, what CSF will do, CSF will fill the subaquinate spaces, or spaces, that is the external surface of the brain. So CSF will fill the external surface of the brain and spinal cord, and at lastly that CSF will be reabsorbed at the aconite villi into the venous blood of dural venous sinuses. Here you can see in the 8 pictures, there CSF will be reabsorbed at aconite villi. So this is the flow of cerebrospinal fluid. So if there is any defect or any obstruction in this flow of cerebrospinal fluid, so that will lead to hydrocephalus. So I hope you all have understood about the flow of CSF. See here in what happened, if there is any obstruction in the flow of cerebrospinal fluid anywhere, if there is any obstruction, so that obstruction will lead to the accumulation of CSF on one part of the brain. So that or in any ventricles, if there is an accumulation, so if there is any obstruction, that will lead to the accumulation of CSF on the one part of the brain, so that results in hydrocephalus. Then we will move on to next, that is incidence. Incidence, here we will see that in incidence it occurs mainly in 3 out of 1000 live births. Hydrocephalus occurs in 80 to 85% of children born with meningomyocele. means it occurs in 80 to 85% of children who are born with meningomyelocele. Meningomyelocele, it is a kind of a birth defect in which developing babies spinal cord fails to develop properly. Here what happened, that spinal cord fails to develop properly, that is known as meningomyelocele. So if baby had this condition, it means that 80 to 85% of these type of babies are suffering from hydrocephalus. Then the incidence is equal in both the males and females. Then we'll go to etiology. Hydrocephalus is a condition of obstructed cerebrospinal fluid circulation or impaired absorption. So here you can see etiology. What it is saying, that hydrocephalus is a condition of obstructed CSF circulation. I have earlier told about the flow of circulation. So if there is any obstruction in the flow of circulation, so that results in hydrocephalus and also impaired absorption. If the cerebrospinal fluid is not absorbed in the correct place, or if not able to absorb properly, so that condition will also lead to hydrocephalus. So in etiology there are two conditions, that is congenital causes and acquired conditions. So firstly we will deal with the congenital causes. In congenital causes, congenital means from birth it is there. So in congenital causes, first is myelomeningocele. Myelomeningocele, approx 80 to 85% of people born with a spina bifida or myelomeningocele have hydrocephalus. What happened is, somewhere along the cerebrospinal fluid pathway, the flow of CSF has been obstructed, because what happened in the case of spina bifida, the spina bifida causes the brain to position further down in the upper spinal column. Spina bifida, what it will do, it will cause the brain to position further down in the upper spinal column. So what happened, due to this the CSF pathway will be disturbed, and there will be there will be obstruction. So there will be more accumulation of CSF at one place, so that results in hydrocephalus. Then second is intrauterine infections like CMV or toxoplasmosis. So what happened in intrauterine infection, when placenta is impaired, so severely that some of the viruses like cytomegalovirus, CMV or toxoplasmosis, they are able to pass through the placenta barrier, and maternal infection would lead to hydrocephalus to the infant due to viruses like cytomegalovirus and toxoplasmosis. Then next is the aqueduct stenosis. So this occurs when the long narrow passageway between the third and fourth ventricles, you have seen the picture in the flow of CSF, third ventricles and fourth ventricles. So between the third and fourth ventricles there is an aqueduct of Sylvius. So that aqueduct of Sylvius is narrowed or blocked because of any infection or any hemorrhage or tumor. So what happened, fluid will accumulate upstream where obstruction is there, and that will produce hydrocephalus. Understood? What happened? Between the third and fourth ventricle, the aqueduct of Sylvius is narrowed or blocked because of any infection or hemorrhage or tumor. So if it will be blocked, the CSF will be accumulate upstream above the third and fourth ventricle. So what happened, there will be obstruction and the CSF will accumulate at one area, so that will lead to the hydrocephalus. Then the last is the Chiari malformation. In extremely rare cases, Chiari malformation occur, and it causes pressure on the brain and produce hydrocephalus. Mainly what happened in Chiari malformation, downward displacement of cerebral tonsils took place through the foramen magnum. What happened? Downward displacement of cerebral tonsil took place through the foramen magnum, and then the CSF outflow impeded, means the CSF outflow is obstructed, which causes hydrocephalus. Then next we will see acquired conditions. Acquired conditions mean it occurs after the birth. First is the intraventricular hemorrhage. Intraventricular hemorrhage means bleeding. Means what happened in this, there will be a bleeding between the ventricles, between third ventricle, fourth ventricle or lateral ventricle. So there will be bleeding between the ventricle, due to which CSF fluid will not flow properly, and it will cause obstruction, and then it will lead to hydrocephalus. In interventricular hemorrhage, what happened, there will be a bleeding in between the ventricles, that is in third ventricle or fourth ventricle or any of the lateral ventricles. There will be bleeding, due to which CSF fluid will not flow properly, and there will be obstruction, which will lead to the hydrocephalus. Then is the trauma. If there is tumor in between brain or any pathway of the cerebrospinal fluid, it will obstruct the cerebrospinal fluid, and there will be accumulation of CSF on one part, so that will cause hydrocephalus. Trauma. Then last is a trauma. If there is any type of traumatic brain injury or infection, or any hemorrhage or tumor that obstructs the flow of CSF, so that will result in hydrocephalus. So mainly here what happened, in all the etiological conditions we will see that there is a problem in a flow of CSF pathway, due to which hydrocephalus occur. So here you can see, here is a picture of cherry malformation. Here what happened, that there is a downward displacement of cerebral tonsils. Opposite side of picture you can see, which is in yellow circle. There what happened, downward displacement of cerebral tonsil is there through the foramen magnum. So what happened, due to which CSF outflow is obstructed, and that causes hydrocephalus. Now we will see the classification of hydrocephalus. It is classified into two types, that is communicating hydrocephalus, it is non-obstructive, and second is non-communicating hydrocephalus, that is obstructive. So firstly is the communicating hydrocephalus. Here it occurs when the CSF flows out of the ventricles and into the spinal canal, but it is not reabsorbed normally by the tissue surrounding the brain and the spinal cord. So here what happened, there will be no any problem in the flow of CSF, but there will be problem in the reabsorption of CSF. In flow of CSF, we have studied in the 8th point that CSF is reabsorbed by Erkenite villi. So here the CSF will flow out from the ventricles and into the spinal canal. The flow of the CSF was very good. In this what happened, it will not reabsorb normally. So here the problem is in reabsorption. So here it will not be reabsorbed normally by the tissue surrounding the brain and the spinal cord, and sometimes this type of hydrocephalus corrects in itself. It will correct itself. So this is known as communicating hydrocephalus. And second is a non-communicating hydrocephalus, that is obstructive. From the name itself we can say it is obstructive. So here it means that there will be a obstruction in the flow of cerebrospinal fluid or circulation. Occurs when the CSF does not flow properly between or out of the brain ventricles because of an obstruction, such as from a malformation or narrowing. So here you can see that CSF will not flow properly between or out of the brain ventricle. So there is a problem in the there will be obstruction in the flow of ventricles. So this is known as non-communicating hydrocephalus. Now we will see pathophysiology of hydrocephalus. CSF fluid imbalance. So first is impaired absorption. So if there will be impaired absorption in the CSF fluid, what happen? Obstruction of flow through ventricular system. There will be obstruction in the ventricular system. Ventricular system where? In the third ventricles and fourth ventricle. So try to remember the flow of CSF. So there will be obstruction in the ventricular system, that is third ventricle, fourth ventricle, or the lateral ventricle. There will be obstruction, so that will lead to increased accumulation of CSF. So if there will be obstruction in the third ventricles or fourth ventricles or ventricular system, so what will happen, there will be more accumulation of CSF accumulation will be increased, so that will result in dilatation of ventricles. So if CSF is accumulated in the ventricles, so what happened, the ventricles will dilate, and also cortex can atrophy, means the cortex will be reduced in size. The cortex will reduce in size because the ventricles are dilated. Why ventricles are dilated? Because of the increased accumulation of CSF. So that will result in, so increase CSF in ventricular system. What happened? The CSF will be increased in the ventricular system, and that will compress brain against the cranium. Cranium means our skull bone. So what happened? That will compress the brain against the cranium. So what happened due to this? What happened, that enlargement of a skull. What happened? The skull will be enlarged because it will compress the brain against the cranium. So as a side effect, what happened? The skull will be enlarged, ventricles are dilated, so that results in hydrocephalus. So this is the pathophysiology of hydrocephalus. Now will lead to clinical manifestation. So in clinical manifestation, in infants you will see the infants abnormally rapid head growth. So here you can see in the picture there is a abnormally rapid head growth. Okay, then second is bulging fontanelles, tense, non-pulsatile. So here tense or bulging fontanelle will be there. Why the tense and bulging fontanelle will occur? Because when fluid builds up in the brain and uh, brain brain will swell, so that result in tense and bulging fontanelles, because fluid is built up in the brain and all the ventricles are dilated and the brains is swell, so that result in tense and bulging fontanelle. And dilated scalp veins, the scalp veins will be visible and it is dilated because that ventricles, third and fourth ventricles are dilated. Then separated sutures, so here the sutures will be separated, and that can be seen from outer in the scalp. You can see that those dilated scalp veins also will be seen, and bulging fontanelle also you can see. Then a most important clinical manifestation is the McEwen sign, that is cracked pot sound on percussion of skull near the junction of the frontal, temporal and parietal bone. McEwen sign, that is known as cracked pot sound. So cracked pot sound, how it is produced? It is produced while percussion or while tapping on the skull. Where you will tap on the skull? Near the junction of frontal, temporal and parietal bone. And this is the most important clinical manifestation, cracked pot sound or McEwen sign. Then thinning of the skull bones, the skull bones will be thin and there will be a poor head control. Baby will not able to control the head, there will be a poor head control. Then later in infancy there will be a enlargement of frontal will be enlarged, eyes will be depressed. Then the sunset eye is the most important clinical factor. Sunset eye, we can also say it as Perinaud syndrome or sunset eye. In this, inability to move eyes up and down. What happened in this sunset eyes? The um, child or infant will not able to move the eyes up and down. It is due to the raised intracranial pressure. So what happened? Intracranial pressure is increased, due to which this sunset eyes you can see. Then with lid retraction and increased tonic down gauge. Increased tonic downgaze means the act of looking downward. So there will be retraction of lid and the child will look downward. And is the pupil sluggish. Pupil sluggish means moving or working more slowly than normal. So here the infant pupil will not move or not work properly. It will work more slowly than the normal. And unequal pupillary response to light. So here pupillary response will not good, and there will be an unequal pupillary response to the light. So these are the clinical manifestations in infant. In childhood we will see um, headache on awakening. If will awake the child, there will be a headache. Then blur vision will be there due to papilledema. Papilledema means when optic nerve at the back of the eye becomes swollen, so that results in papilledema. So there will be blur vision due to papilledema. Then strabismus, that is known as abducens nerve palsy. Strabismus means it is crossed eyes, or eyes don't look in exactly the same direction at the same time. Like for example, we have a coordinated eye directions. We look at the same direction. Both the eyes are at same direction if we see an object. So in strabismus, what happened? The eyes will not look exactly on the same direction at the same time. That is known as strabismus. Then irritability will be there in the child, and lethargy. Child will be more lethargic, and confusion will be there, and vomiting will be there in the child. So these are the clinical manifestation in childhood. Now we will deal with the diagnosis, that is diagnostic evaluation. The first and the foremost in diagnostic evaluation is history taking, to collect the history from the parents, or about history collection. Then the physical findings in infant. So physical finding in infant is very important, which includes the following. So first is a bradycardia due to pressure on the brainstem. So if there is a pressure on the brainstem, that results in bradycardia, that is slow heart rate. Then is systemic hypertension. Systemic hypertension means high blood pressure in the systemic arteries, the vessels that carry blood from the heart to the body tissues. So there will be high blood pressure on the systemic arteries, the vessels that carry blood from the heart to the body tissue. And there is an altered respiration and sometimes apnea. Apnea, you all know, that is cessation of breath. Then altered respiration. Why there is altered respiration? Because as vital functions are controlled from brainstem. As vital functions are controlled from brainstem, a very high CSF pressure can lead to problems that results in breathing. So altered breathing will be there with apnea. Here you can see in the picture what all physical symptoms. You'll see there is a large head. So head circumference is most important, measurement of the head circumference. Then there is a soft spot called fontanelle, that is bulging fontanelles we'll see. And sunset eyes, down gaze of the eyes will be there. Then prominent veins over the head. So you can see the dilated or prominent veins over the head. So these are the physical symptoms which we have to see while assessing the child. Then is the McQueen sign. McQueen sign, I've already told you all about earlier about the McQueen sign. A cracked pot sound is there, is produced while tapping or percussion on the head. On the open fontanelles on the head, a cracked pot sound is produced while percussion near the junction of frontal, temporal and parietal bone. As long as the anterior fontanelle is open, that is up to 18 months, the test will be positive. So as long as anterior fontanelle is opened up to 18 months, so McQueen sign will be there. The test will always be positive up to 18 months. Then is transillumination. Transillumination, here you can see in the picture, transillumination is a shining of a bright light through a body cavity or organ. Shining of a bright light through a body cavity or organ for a diagnostic purpose to check for any abnormality in the brain. That is known as transillumination. Then next is the sun-setting eyes. I have already told earlier about the sun-setting eyes in infant. It is a characteristics of increased ICP, that is increased intracranial pressure. Ocular globes are deviated downwards. Ocular globes means the eyeball. Eyeballs are deviated downwards, down gaze of the eyes. And the upper lids are retracted. The upper lids will be retracted, and the white sclera may be visible above the iris. So here you can see in the picture visibly that white sclera will be visible. So this is all about the diagnostic evaluation. Now next we will go to medical management. So in medical management, the goal of treatment in client with hydrocephalus is to reduce or prevent brain damage by improving the flow of CSF. So in management aspect, we will see three things, that is medical management, surgical management, and nursing management. So in medical management, the goal of treatment with hydrocephalus is to reduce or prevent the brain damage. It is very important. How we will reduce or prevent brain damage? By improving the flow of cerebrospinal fluid. So the following medications are used to treat hydrocephalus. First are diuretics like acetazolamide and furosemide. Acetazolamide dose may be as high as 1000 mg per kg will give, and furosemide 1 mg per kg we will give to treat post-hemorrhagic hydrocephalus, to decrease the secretion of cerebrospinal fluid at the level of choroid plexus. So here what these drugs will do, it will treat the post-hemorrhagic hydrocephalus to decrease the secretion. So their CSF cerebrospinal fluid secretions will be decreased at the level of choroid plexus where it is secreted. Then anticonvulsions will interfere the impulse transmission of cerebral cortex and prevent the seizures. So anticonvulsions will help to prevent seizures, and it will interfere with impulse transmission of cerebral cortex. Then other antibiotics. Culture and sensitivity depends from shunt infections such as septicemia, ventriculitis, meningitis, or given as prophylactic treatment. So antibiotics are given. So these are the medical management aspect that will help to reduce or prevent the brain damage by improving the flow of cerebrospinal fluid. Then the second is a surgical management. In surgical management, we will see a certain types of shunts. We will deal with the three shunts, that is ventriculoperitoneal shunt, that is VP shunt, then ventriculoatrial shunt, that is VA shunt, and ventriculopleural shunt is there. So these are the three types of shunts which we will deal. So first is ventriculoperitoneal, that is VP shunts. So this is a preferred procedure, especially in neonates and young infants. So this procedure is mostly preferred for neonates and young infants, and it relieves pressure on the brain caused by fluid accumulation. So VP shunt is done to relieve pressure on the brain which is caused by fluid accumulation, and is done to help drain extra CSF from the brain. So what happened, VP shunt will be placed into the head, and this VP shunt work by taking the fluid out of the brain and moving it into the abdomen where it is absorbed into the body. This lowers the pressure and swelling in the brain. So in this what happened, ventricular catheter is inserted into the anterior portion of a lateral ventricle through a burr hole in the skull. So this catheter will drain off the CSF fluid, and those CSF fluid will move into the abdomen cavity where tissue of the abdominal cavity will absorb the CSF. So that is known as ventriculoperitoneal shunt. You can also see in the picture tubing is there. So there is a greater allowance for the excess tubing that will minimize the number of revisions needed as a child grow. So that tubing is there from from the head to the abdomen. So that will drain the CSF and will lower the pressure and swelling in the brain. So that is known as ventricular peritoneal shunt, that is VP shunt. Then second is the ventriculoatrial shunt, that is VA shunt. It is reversed for older children who has attained most of their somatic growth and children with abdominal pathology. So ventriculoatrial shunt is reserved for older children who have attained most of their somatic growth and children with abdominal pathology, and it requires repeated lengthening as child grow. A silicone catheter is inserted in lateral ventricle. So a silicone catheter is inserted in the lateral ventricles of the brain and down where in the internal jugular vein into the left atrium of the heart. So in this, CSF is shunted from the cerebral ventricles into the right atrium of the heart, and it is the second preferred choice if VP shunt is not possible. A silicone catheter is inserted in the lateral ventricles of the heart, and this CSF drains into the circulating blood. So this is known as the ventriculoatrial, uh, that is VA shunt. Now we will lead to this third shunt, that is ventriculopleural shunt. These shunts are sometimes used for children above 5 years of age. So these shunts are sometimes used in children above the 5 years of age, and this type of shunt drains fluid from the lateral ventricle to the pleural cavity. So from this type of shunt will drain the fluid from the lateral ventricle of the brain to the pleural cavity. Drainage of the CSF, drainage of the cerebrospinal fluid may cause hydrothorax. Drainage of the CSF can cause hydrothorax and necessitating either removal of the shunt or a thoracentesis. So there will be two options after that. Either removal of the shunt or a thoracentesis will be there. You all know about thoracentesis. It is a removal of fluid or air from the pleural space. And a nurse, so it is most important for the nurse to observe these children carefully for any of the respiratory difficulties. So this is all about the surgical management. Then is the complications of shunts. So the main complications of the shunt is the malfunction, most often caused by mechanical obstruction either within the ventricles or at a distal end from thrombosis. Malfunction most common is there, most common complication of shunt is there. Then second is a shunt infection. Shunt infection is also a serious complication of shunt. It can occur at any time, but a period of greater risk is 1 to 2 months following placement. The infection may be result of intercurrent infections at time of shunt replacement. Infection may include sepsis, wound infection, etc. The third is a subdural hematoma. It is another serious shunt related complication caused by the rapid reduction of subdural caused by the rapid reduction of subdural hematoma, which is a pool of blood between a brain and its outer covering. Subdural hematoma, it is an serious shunt related complication, and subdural hematoma means a pool of blood between brain and its outer covering, and it is caused by rapid reduction of intracranial pressure and size. Then the last we will deal with the nursing management. So nursing management, firstly is we have to teach the family members about the management required for the disorder, and then we have to provide pre-operative nursing care, which is most important. Pre-operative nursing care, like we have to assess head circumference, fontanelles, cranial sutures, and LOC. LOC means loss of consciousness. The nurse has to check for irritability, altered feeding habits, and the high pitched cry. Nurse have to firmly support the head and neck when holding the child, provide skin care for head to prevent the breakdown, encourage the parental newborn bonding, and provide post-operative care. So post-operative care is very important. In post-operative care, we will assess for signs of intracranial pressure (ICP) and will check the head circumference daily. That is most important, and will administer the prescribed medications which may include antibiotics to prevent infection and analgesics for pain, and will observe child for any type of abdominal distension, and most important is nurse have to maintain an intake output chart. So these are some of the nursing interventions or nursing management which we have to check. And then nursing diagnosis, we will see ineffective cerebral tissue perfusion related to increased intracranial pressure. So expected outcome will be there will be an effective cerebral tissue perfusion. In interventions, what we will do, we will give proper position to the baby, keep the head of the baby in neutral, that is in midline position, to promote the venous drainage, and we have to avoid extreme rotation and flexion of the neck, as these can cause compression and distortion as jugular veins, uh, which will further increase the intracranial pressure. Then second nursing diagnosis is imbalanced nutrition less than body requirement related to reduced oral intake and vomiting. So in expected outcome, we have to check the nutritional status of the baby and have to maintain the nutritional status of the baby. Intervention will be, we have to assess the nutritional status of the baby, we have to maintain the weight of the baby, and intake output charting will be there, and daily recording is done. Then third nursing diagnosis is risk for impaired skin integrity related to enlarged head. So expected outcome will be there, that is skin integrity will be maintained. In interventions, what we will do, we have to assess the skin integrity of the baby, we have to prevent the pressures on that enlarged head, and we have to provide the firm support pillow under the child head. We have to keep the area clean and dry, and good skin care and range of motion exercise are also essential to prevent the skin breakdown. And last, the fourth one is the risk for infection related to introduction of infecting organism through the shunt. So expected outcome will be, there will be no signs and symptoms of any type of infections. In interventions, what we will do, have to check and record the vital signs of the baby, use aseptic techniques while doing any procedure on the baby, we have to wash hands properly before touching the baby, we have to maintain general cleanliness of the area and baby, and we have to administer antibiotics as prescribed to the baby. So these are all about the nursing diagnosis. So here I have completed this topic, hydrocephalus. If you have any doubts or any queries, you can ask me. Thank you.